there's almost a psychic, you understand the word psychic? ESP?
Yeah.
There's almost a psychic attraction. You're not sleepwalking, you're not dreaming, you're really conscious, but something is making you brave. Something's making you get closer and closer to the cornstalk. Although I would use the flashlight as a weapon, meaning if you're afraid, I think rather than holding the flashlight comfortably down here, you'd hold it out like that. It's kind of like a lance, a magic user lance, as you walk through here. And I would come out of the house this way and across the lens, which looks very pretty. And also it's kind of scary. My appetite has always been to, put a lot of value on the screen, and sometimes the people become somewhat diminished because of the story that surrounds them. But with E.T., I had always really wanted to tell the story of a disenfranchised and lonely boy in a relationship with siblings, a sister, a brother. I had 3 younger sisters. And I also wanted to tell a story about the divorce of my parents.
Dad would believe me.
Maybe you ought to call your father and tell him about it.
I can't. He's in Mexico with Sally.
And for a while I've been thinking about just a movie about a child's reaction to his parents splitting up when he's still only about 10 years old, and how that impacts him for the rest of his life. And E.T. was on my mind maybe for 15, 20 years, perhaps for a number of years somewhat subconsciously, as a fantasy of mine, as a way to make myself feel less lonely in my life. And also, it was a childhood fantasy to tell the story of a best friend and a special friend who rescues a young boy from the sadness. Was a movie, really, it was really the original movie, and E.T. therefore is the sequel.
One of the things that really, really inspired me to want to work with Stephen was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The movie had a profound effect on me, and I really feel in looking back that movie, more than anything, was the catalyst that really moved me into saying, this is what I want to do as a career. I want to make movies. And so when I did, in fact, find myself eventually working with Stephen, one of the things that we talked a lot about was the research that he had done during the making of Close Encounters with a man named Hynek. And he asked me to go investigate a particular case.
Having to do with a farm family that was terrorized one evening by gremlin-like extraterrestrials that surrounded the house and kept trying to gain access to the house and rode the cows through the barnyard and made the people crazy.
And I'd seen this movie called Return of the Secaucus 7. Now, why in the world this had anything to do with E.T.? I was intrigued with John Sayles, and no one knew who John Sayles was at the time. And I went running downstairs after the screening to meet him. And I said, I love the writing in your movie, and I think you might be perfect for this project that I'm working on with Steven Spielberg. Could you come meet with us? So he came over to the Egg Company, he sat down and he met with us. We gave him the research on Night Skies, and he wrote the first draft of Night Skies.
But when I read the script, I just didn't feel that was a movie that I wanted to direct. It was too violent. It turned me against myself and against my own beliefs that anything that would take so many light years and so much technology just to get to the planet Earth, would they come with lasers and missiles and bad intentions? Personally, I never thought that would be the case. I thought they would come here to either observe at a distance or to interact in some kind of healthy way. So it really went against my grain as a filmmaker and as a storyteller to tell an aggressive, scary story about aliens attacking a farmhouse. And that's when everything kind of like changed in my mind, and it sort of became, I'm not going to make that movie, but I might make this movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark, we were shooting that sometime around 1979 or 80. We were shooting Raiders. And I remember spending not a lot of time between shots because I shot Raiders so quickly there wasn't a lot of time to think between shots. But there was a particularly long setup, and I walked out into the desert. I was picking up prehistoric seashells out there because certainly, the desert in Tunisia used to be the ocean a long, long time ago. Maybe that's where Jurassic Park came from, at least my interest in dinosaurs. I don't know, but that all kind of was a cousin to turning over seashells and suddenly trying to figure out how can I tell the story of this lonely boy. I'm sitting here, I'm a lonely director in the middle of the desert in Tunisia making a Saturday matinee serial type of a movie. And I won't go into my personal life, but I was feeling a little bit, separate from myself, which often happens when you're directing. You kind of go into a kind of fugue state to make a movie. And I was in one of my fugue states, and I suddenly, bang, this concept hit me. I knew exactly how to tell the story of E.T., and the story began to flood into my mind. And for the next couple of days, during the shooting of Raiders, E.T. pretty much had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Cut. Great. Beauty. Okay, very nice. Good for the stars?
Yes,
Watch it. Great.
Minor thing.
Beautiful.
You didn't see in the last little.
Henry? Great. You okay? Yeah. That was terrific. What? So kind of like the bones of the story began to fall into place in the middle of the Tunisian desert, looking at seashells. And it took me 2 or 3 days to kind of figure out a story. And then when I had it, I remembered loving this movie called The Black Stallion. I love that picture so much. And I remember loving the way Carol Ballard directed it, and then discovering or knowing that Melissa Matheson, who was on the set with Harrison Ford, had co-authored the Black Stallion.
I was in Tunisia with Harrison on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and of course I had been around in London where they had started the picture, and so had become friendly with Steven Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy. So we went off to Tunisia, and I had been trying to write a script based on a book I had optioned, and I was very unhappy with it and feeling pretty miserable about myself. And one day we were out in the Sahara Desert, and Stephen was showing me how to find scorpions, that you just turn over a rock, and there they are. So we were turning over rocks, looking at scorpions, and he asked me if I would consider writing a movie for him. Well, of course. I think I did protest that I was never going to try to do that again.
And I kind of worked on her. I worked on her and kept nagging her about. Went to Harrison. I said, Harrison, talk to your wife. I think she should write this movie. And then I remember Kathy Kennedy went after Melissa and tried to talk her into it. And between Kathy Kennedy and Harrison Ford, I think the two of them talked Melissa into at least doing a first draft for me. And so that's how it all got started.
Many of the scenes from the movie E.T. come from my own experience being with children. For instance, the Willard and Benjamin Harrison's sons and their friends and other people, what they would like from an alien, what they would like his powers to be. A lot of the children would mention the obvious of telepathy or telekinetic powers, but I was struck by the fact that several of them mentioned that they would like, if this magic creature came into their life, they would like him to be able to heal. And I thought it was such an incredibly poignant idea to come from a child. And they weren't talking about save someone's life by healing. They were talking about take the owies away. And I thought it was just so simple and such a personal idea coming from a child. And, of course, E.T. heals.
Ouch! It was poison. Ouch! I drank it to save my life. Tink, dear Tink, bring it down. Ouch! She says she thinks she could get well again.
And I was very interested also in that E.T. would communicate often psychically, could be able to reach out to Elliot in school and give him ideas while he was sitting in class. And if E.T. got drunk, Elliot got drunk.
As we get started with the dissection, remember that the things that you are writing down.
And Elliot would start becoming and feeling E.T., a feeling that E.T.'s psychic spirit was inside of him. And that was really interesting. And those were ideas. I didn't know where it was going to go. Melissa didn't know where it was going to fall into the structure of the movie. But these were just like the wish list of, can we put this in the movie? Can we put that in the movie?
I think Steven Spielberg and I decided very early on that we didn't want to have any adults, mucking up the works, basically. And if it was important for a couple of reasons. First of all, E.T., being this little creature that he was, only lived with people of his own size, basically. That the world that he saw, the earth that he saw, was small. It was filled with little people. So when he went back to his planet, he would basically be reporting on a planet that was populated by children, which we thought was kind of a poetic idea. And secondly, for Elliot, Elliot had to have the power in the movie. If for a moment an adult took the power away before it became a matter of life and death, then Elliot would have lost all of his magic.
I never wanted to show grown-ups in the movie until the very end. I wanted to suggest them, show them from the waist down, kind of like a Tom and Jerry cartoon, where the mom of the house comes in, you only see her from the waist down. Later we did that kind of even better with Roger Rabbit, when Bob did that same technique with Roger. But that's almost a requirement of cartoon. The whole cartoon world, when you have animals as cartoon characters, adults are not often shown. I like those old Tex Avery cartoons where you only see the people from the waist down. And I was also raised on cartoons. I was raised with television, raised with cartoons, and it just made sense to me to create a world. I didn't want that world contaminated with anything beyond at most a 14-and-a-half-year-old's point of view.
Some of the things that you should be looking for during the dissection is to locate the heart and notice that it is still beating.
And as I remember it, I would write for 4 days, 5 days in my little office in Hollywood, and then I would drive out to Marina del Rey, where Steven Spielberg was editing in a little apartment on the beach. And I'd bring in my pages, and we'd sit and we'd go through the pages and say what worked, what didn't work, where we'd go from there, talk about the next hunk that should be written. Then I'd go back to my little office and do my writing and come back again a few days later to meet him. And it took 8 weeks for us to get the first draft, which was quite fast, I think.
And she delivered this 107-page first draft to me, and I read it in about, I'm a slow reader, but I think I read that in about an hour. And I was just knocked out. It was a script that I was willing to shoot tomorrow. I didn't really want to do a lot with it. It was honest, and it was right from both of our hearts, but Melissa's voice made a direct connection with my heart.
I was having lunch with Willie Hunt, who was an executive at MGM at the time. In fact, we were discussing Poltergeist because we were making Poltergeist at the same time. And Steven came running into the commissary with the screenplay, and he said, "I've just read Melissa's first draft, and we could shoot this tomorrow. It's the best first draft I've ever read." And I think in many respects, Steven would say that that's true even today.
I was going to do E.T. for Columbia, and I think they liked the script. They didn't dislike it. And there's a number of rumors I heard, and I don't want to report a rumor because I don't have any facts to base this, but by hook or by crook, Columbia chose another movie they had in development called Starman that eventually became a wonderful movie starring Jeff Bridges. And they chose that over E.T., and they said, "But look, we're not going to make your movie, but we'll certainly give it back to you to take anywhere you'd like." And I got the rights back and took it immediately to Sid Sheinberg, my mentor, my friend, and the head of Universal Studios. And I showed him the script, and I even at that point had even we had I believe E.T. in clay. We had the head in clay, and we had some visual concepts that I had done with Ed Verreau on paper. And I remember sending Sid the script and a picture of a clay bust of E.T. and some drawings that Ed Verreau had done to decide whether he wanted to make the movie or not. And the next day he called up and he said, "I think it's a very good idea for a movie. Go ahead and do it." So we set off to make the picture at that time. Night Skies from the John Sayles script, I hired Rick Baker. Undoubtedly, the best creature, designer, at that time ever. And to this day, Rick Baker and I continue to work together and do films together. He's just a genius. He designed some really incredible aliens, but I kind of didn't want 7 incredible aliens. I wanted one special character. And I remember when I went to Rick and I said, I'm changing this whole thing. We're not making this movie anymore. Instead of making another movie about one creature who comes down and befriends one small boy, Rick had done so much hard work on these multiple creatures that I think Rick was just sort of let down because his whole creature shop was devoted to a larger palette. And I was now restricting him to just one character. And Rick was disappointed that we weren't going the whole route. And I think Rick and I decided together that this wasn't perhaps a film that we should do together because this was not what Rick expected to do. He was hoping to do something much different. And Rick said, you want to make a kids movie? And I said, that's right. I said, actually, I think E.T.'s not going to make a lot of money. I think I'm making a movie that is only going to appeal to kids. And I agreed that Night Skies was much more of a broader audience picture, certainly a scarier movie. We'll get more teenagers in. And I said, yeah, I'm probably making a big mistake. I'm going to make an old-fashioned Walt Disney movie about an alien and a kid, and that's going to be all it's going to be. And so I think we had an understanding. We separated, and I went off to try to find a designer for my single creature. And I first went to Stan Winston, who did a kind of really interesting design. I had one concept for E.T. that was pretty consistent with all the designers, and that is I didn't want anybody to think that E.T. was anything other than an actual extraterrestrial. Therefore, it couldn't look like there was somebody in a suit. And I wanted him to be only 3 feet tall. So I said, I need him to have such a small neck, and I want the neck to telescope like a turtle coming out of a shell. And so Stan Winston did me a very interesting creature. I told Stan, I'm shopping. I'd like you to do a creature. If I like it, we'll work together. At the same time, I went over to Carlo Rambaldi, being inside that suit. And that was a concept I think that I came up with even back during Close Encounters. And then Carlo did a couple designs for me, and simply, I love Carlo's designs. Ed Verreau had been sketching E.T.'s face with me at my beach house on weekends, and we gave Carlo about 4 or 5 or 6 sketches that Ed had done.
It first started with myself and Carlo Rambaldi working directly with Stephen, doing drawings of E.T. And in the early stages, we didn't really know what E.T. was going to look like because we were just sort of talking about him, okay? I think that we actually, at some point fairly early on, had set down some ground rules. That is that E.T. isn't a monster.
I remember saying to Carlo, here's some pictures of Albert Einstein, Ernest Hemingway, and Carl Sandburg. I love their eyes. Can we make E.T.'s eyes as frivolous and also wizened and as sad as those 3 icons?
The thing I really remember very specifically working with Stephen was actually going into his office and his having all these books and saying, here, those are neat eyes, that's a neat mouth, look at this person. And I mean, they were really interesting because they would be some very, very, very old people. And you'd get these very old, wizened eyes and stuff. And he would say, yeah, he said, I see that, that's nice. The way we worked with this stuff is Carlo and I would go away for a day or 2, and we would just draw a lot of stuff. We would just basically shotgun. And then we would go back to Stephen's office and we would basically pin the stuff up on the wall, and then Stephen would look at them and say, well, I like that, or I like a bit of this, or that's an interesting nose, or whatever.
Carl did a number of versions in clay, and I stood over Carlo and worked with him. I'm not an artist, so I didn't touch the clay, but I would say too scary, too Disney, too sweet. And finally, this creature did emerge from clay after a couple of weeks that was E.T., that became E.T. I was not happy with any of the eye work that we were doing on E.T., the eye looked like it was a painting against almost plastic, and it didn't have depth or anything. And I kept saying, well, who does glass eyes? Because glass eyes look really real. A person has a human eye and a person has a glass eye, and often you can only tell the eye is glass when one eye wanders and the other eye stays fixed straight ahead. And I just kept saying to Kathy, go find me somebody that makes real glass eyes, and let's give them a job working on E.T. So Kathy went off and found Beverly, who worked at the Jules Stein Eye Institute, and came on board and did this wonderful job of making a rather, overlarged, oversized glass eye for us. And I just said, whatever E.T. looks like inside, I want to be able to see his organs. When he turns on his heart light, I want to be able to see the organs around the light moving and kind of breathing and moving in a strange way. And I think it was Craig Reardon and Short who said, well, I understand from your script that you think E.T. is a plant. And I said, yeah, I don't think he's a mammal. He's not a bird. He's not a fish. I think he's a vegetable. And they said, well, we have this concept of maybe making his insides look a bit like a plant. Would that be okay? I said, that's fantastic. Go ahead and do it. So they had this idea of doing something very plant-like with the inside of E.T.
But we did get to a point where I finally just kind of threw up my hands and I said, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how in the world we're ever going to get E.T. to move in a way that you're going to believe without putting somebody in a suit. So I called up Stephen's lawyer's partner, Harold Brown, and he had a 4-year-old daughter at the time. She's now, I think, graduated from Harvard or something. And I said, look, I just want to test this. I feel that if I can put somebody in a suit and video it and show Stephen, and it works on some level, we certainly don't have to rely on this, but we can at least use it for some shots. But he's never going to go for this unless we can show him. Would you be willing to bring Rachel to Carlo's shop and we'll put her inside the suit? And Harold said, okay. So by the time he arrives, this 4-year-old is completely hysterically crying and is not into doing this at all. And Harold comes over to me, he goes, I don't know if this is going to work. I've tried to bribe her with 2 McDonald's and it's not working. I told her we go to McDonald's after she does this. She could have 2 burgers, she could have any milkshake she wanted, and she still doesn't want to do it. So I go over and I try to talk to Rachel. She gets a little bit calmed down. She gets the suit on. By the time we get the head on, she is completely hysterical again. And she's jumping up and down and screaming and crying. And Harold said, just roll tape. So we roll tape Harold in the suit, but he bought it. And he said, okay, I agree. This may be the way we have to go.
So I thought, couldn't we find a little person to be inside E.T.'s bodysuit when he walks around and moves around, and the person who did most of the walk on his hands. He did the most memorable sequence when E.T. walks into the room having had a few too many beers and was stumbling around and falling on his face, and Gertie knocked him over when she opened the refrigerator door and he fell over backwards, and that was all of Matthew's contribution. And then Tamara de Troth did the very opening scene where E.T. comes out of the woodshed and places the Reese's Pieces on Elliot's sleeping bag. Tamara also did the last scene in the movie where E.T. walks up the gangway holding the flowers that Gertie had given him, and that was Tamara's contribution. When I saw the mechanical arms that Carlo had designed, they were really great, but this is technology back in the early 80s, so the technology then, they were very jerky when they worked. They could move, the fingers would move, but almost too thoughtfully. And the arms always had what I call wagga wagga. An arm would stop and go wagga wagga wagga, or like wagga wagga. And the arms were just becoming a little bit ungainly, like that. And it was, and I felt, my God, E.T.'s got to have almost balletic arms, almost like the hands of a mime. So I just put it out there, can we hire a mime? And we'll put the E.T. hand makeup on a mime's hands so the artist can really be artistic about picking things up and touching themselves and reaching out and touching Elliot and Gertie and Michael. And so this is where this wonderful mime artist came to work with us.
All sorts of things evolved through the process of filming, one of which were the hands, which was Caprice Roth. I
remember a wonderful moment where Caprice's had a lot of coffee in the morning when we came to work early, and we began to work, and her hands were actually shaking. And I thought she was doing it, she had found something about E.T.'s character. And that same scene was a wonderful moment where E.T. is trying to express him or herself. And E.T. was eating some watermelon. And there was a little bit of watermelon that was on the lip. And Caprice always had this monitor that she could look at. The most natural thing in the world was she reaches up, takes a little piece of errant watermelon off of the lip. I mean, who would have thought of that except somebody who was very in touch with human behavior? And she really had a great understanding of just the way the human body moves and what we do with our hands and our face and our bodies. And it's a tiny moment that people don't ever recognize in the movie, but I'm really proud of what she brought to that scene, just by taking a little piece of food off the lip. Brought E.T. to life like that. He was alive in that moment. Completely alive. Nobody was running him. There were no wires. There were no servo motors going. That was really someone from somewhere else.
E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home.
Take your hand away from his mouth.
E.T. phone home.
Go. Gag him again.
E.T. phone home.
Good. Now take your hand away. Stop for a second. Looks like he's going to behave. And then he says it again.
E.T.
Gag him.
phone home.
And cut. I always felt that E.T. had 12 hearts, and each heart belonged to the operator, one of the operators that had a function that was able to move his cheek, create a smile, create a blink, create a pulsing of blood through veins in the neck. But they were all E.T.'s fathers, or I used to call them E.T.'s hearts. My favorite E.T. is the one that touches his heart, and he looks up when he sees the spaceship descending through the trees to come to get him at the end of the movie. That was my favorite all-time E.T., and that was an E.T. completely operated by wires, by pulling on wires that moved, armatures that stretched the latex of the skin and gave E.T. his look of wonder.
One of the things Stephen knew from the very beginning was that E.T. would be a very shadowy, hardly seen figure in the early stages of the film, that we would take a while to discover him. So it became, what color should he be and what texture should his skin be for the initial stages where we were to barely see the outline of this creature. And one of the things we tested was different colors. I remember him being everything from somewhat of a green to much more purple than he wound up. And that brownish skin with purple overtones evolved out of those early tests. And initially I was shooting footage of just the head, and I know what would annoy Stephen was if I lit it too much, if there was too much detail about E.T. in the shot. He said, no, we're seeing him too clearly. And even in those early stages, we evolved the procedure of using a strong backlight on him, his face largely in shadow, and just the glint in the eyes. And that was the way the beginning scenes of E.T. were, other than those brief glimpses in the flashlights in the corn stalks. And that guided us into the style where once we had E.T.'s lighting down, it was how to light the scene around him so that it all made sense. And one of the first things I said when I read the script is that everything to do with the house and the neighborhood and the family all had to be very, very real, that you couldn't have any false, mysterious type of things. Everything had to be naturally motivated because the magic would happen with the presence of E.T. And when E.T. came into the house would remain the same outwardly, but in the room and in the closet it would be transformed into this magic place.
I'm keeping him. What is it? He won't hurt you, Gertie. He won't hurt you, Gertie. We're not gonna hurt you.
Do you remember the original title?
It was A Boy's Life.
Yep, that's it.
And then it was E.T. and Me.
Uh-huh.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And we got hats and shirts.
That said E.T. and Me.
E.T. and Me.
Wow.
But I don't know what it was like for you, but like I was in town and I had done 2 other things before that. And I was doing post-production work on on one of these projects and didn't really even have an agent. And somehow I got this meeting set up and went in for an audition. And even then I hadn't read a script for the, for the project. I didn't even know what it was about.
I had not been able to find an Elliot. I had looked for a long time, at least 6 months, could not find an Elliot. Actually, had made an offer to a boy who I thought was Elliot, and then the parents, didn't want him to do the movie, and there was a dispute about money, and it didn't work out, so that fell through. And I was really only about, I'd say, 4 or 5 weeks away from shooting the movie without an Elliot. And I remember hearing from Jack Fisk, had just made a movie, and he had used this kid named Henry Thomas. And he recommended through our casting person that I take a look at Henry.
Well, my audition was kind of scary. It was, as I said before, I mean, when I went in there, I started reading, and these 2 random scenes. I hadn't read a script. I just kind of knew a brief synopsis of what the story was about. And I read these, God, this is horrible, I'm not going to get this part, I'm not reading very well.
I think in a funny way, with children, you almost know the minute they walk into the room whether you're in fact looking at the character because of personality. And that's what you're looking for in terms of trying to find the character.
Stephen said, well, let's do an improvisation. Let's, here's a situation. You found this creature and you love it, and it's like your dog. You have a dog at home? Yeah, I have a dog. Well, it's like your dog. It's kind of like your pet, and they're trying to take it away from you. The government's going to take it away and do experiments.
And I got behind the video camera, turned it on, and that's what happened. And that's who Henry was, and that's how Henry convinced me that he was Elliot.
Is it true? Is there an alien in this house?
Yes, sir.
Well, as you know, I am from the government. I'm part of the United States government, and I am empowered to take that alien with me.
But you can't take him away. He's mine.
Well, but the government is bigger than you are, Elliot, and I'm afraid I have to, son.
Can't take him away. He's mine.
But it's not my choice. The president asked me to come here and get him.
I don't care what the president says. He's my best friend. And you can't take him away.
Well, it's real possible, Elliot, that he'll come back and you can have him again. But we just want to talk to him and see where he came from and try to find out about other planets. And he probably is the key to a lot of things that we have to know.
But how do I know you're going to bring him back?
Well, I'm afraid, son, I can't guarantee it.
I think he's afraid of you.
That may be true, but the government tells me what to do, and I just follow their orders.
Well, he's mine, and he lives with me, and he likes me. And he wants to stay here. He likes it here.
Well, we wouldn't hurt him or anything. All we want to do is talk to him.
But I don't want you to take him away.
I've had to talk to your mom about it, and she knows that the government has the right to do it.
And who told you all this?
Well, we learned about it. We know that he's somewhere around here. I mean, I do have a search warrant. I could look around the house.
Tell me to keep the eye. Right. Tell me to keep.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you let me talk to him for 5 minutes, I'll tell my boss that you can keep him. Would that be okay with you, if I could just talk to him for 5 minutes? Would you feel better then? Would you be happy if you could keep him if all I had to do was talk to him for 5 minutes? That might make your whole day, huh? Might make your whole life, huh? And then he'd be your friend forever, and I wouldn't take him away. Okay, Elliot.
Okay, kid, you got the job. Everybody in the room was in tears. I just remember turning to Henry and saying, okay, kid, you got the part.
I auditioned for Poltergeist originally.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't?
No.
Really? Yeah, I did. Wow. I auditioned for Poltergeist, and Stephen just said, no, you're not right for that, you're right for this, so come back. And I came in a lot of times. And at first, he really just wants to meet you and get to know you, you know, and I was so happy to have a grown-up that would listen to me talk, you know, and he believed in my stories, and he loved them, and it made me feel so good and alive.
Well, Drew, you know, I met a lot of Gerties, but when Drew came in, she had the part the minute she stepped into the room because she began to make up these stories that she was a punk rocker. She had a punk rock band. She was going on the road. She was going to do an entire... She's 6 years old, and she told me that she's going to do a 20-city tour in America with her punk rock band. And then she kept making up stories, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger and wilder, and she just blew me away. I mean, there was no second choice. I mean, Drew Barrymore was the first choice for this part.
Is he a boy or a girl? He's a boy. Was he wearing any clothes? No. But look, you can't tell. Not even... Give me a break.
The first I heard of E.T. it was actually called A Boy's Life, and what happened was I was doing a play in New York, and they had me come and read for a movie called The Entity in Los Angeles, and I didn't get that part, and the casting director said, well, I hear there's something going on over at Spielberg's office, and Fenton and Feinberg were casting, and so she made a phone call, and I ended up getting in on a late audition for A Boy's Life. And I remember the day of the audition, it wasn't really an audition because they wouldn't allow the script to be seen. So it was more of an interview with Stephen himself.
Now I want you to take this thing off like Richard the Lionhearted in Robin Hood.
Get the bikes! Meet us at the playground at the top of the hill.
Well, I thought Robert was just a really good actor. He had stage experience. He was the most professional of all the kids. And he was the one that really, you know, was the anchor because he had worked and he had been in front of people before acting, and he was real solid.
Mom, remember the goblin? Michael, what are you talking about? Just swear the most excellent promise you can make. Michael.
That's terrific. I didn't have to audition after. I think I had done my audition in used cars, and Stephen is the master at casting. You know, he watches people and has a real talent for taking whatever their quality is and putting them in the role that's right for them. He originally saw me doing hookers and call girls and put me into his mother.
I chose Dee Wallace because Dee was like herself a kid, and I didn't feel I was violating my rule not to have adults.
The first time I met Stephen, I was brought down by a casting agent named Mike Fenton, who was a big fan, and he really tried to help me a lot when I was starting. And he wanted me to meet Stephen for Indiana Jones. And he asked me, he said, can you wear a hat? I said, well, I wear hats all the time. And he didn't really say much. They just had Stephen was in a room, and he gave me this fedora and told me that I was going to be a swashbuckling adventurer and just go in and meet the guy. And I walked in. As I walked in, I tripped over a lampstand.
Had I made Raiders a comedy, I would have cast Peter Coyote to play Indiana Jones, but it was just a straight-out comedy because he was kind of awkward and clumsy and stuff. But I think he made a good impression on me, and I remembered him, and then those memories carried over, and I said, whatever happened to that guy that kept knocking things down? You know, when he came into audition for me and George for Raiders and gave him the part. Action.
It'll be all right. Oh, would you like the flowers?
Robert, it would be cool, you know, but when all the other guys kind of came there, then it was like I was the little brother trying to follow the guy around, which worked because that was kind of the character in the beginning, you know, and until I find this kind of weird, though. I mean, we had a great time, I think.
We did have a lot of fun.
I dreamed about there was real ETs, and you know, there's like one, and he was in the house playing when all of a sudden he heard this giant noise. We went outside, and there's this spaceship. No, really, I had this dream.
And then the thing with Drew worked out perfectly because that was supposed to be the relationship in the movie was us, you know, me torturing her doll or whatever it was. You know, that's how we treated her, and I'm very guilty about it.
Promise? Yes.
One of my jobs as associate producer and writer was to read a little speech that he says to the elf. I mean, is that
plausible.
I don't like that either.
You do have to.
You have to play
if
your
you're using your
character.
charisma and you have to talk to somebody, then you're supposed to sort of speak in.
Yeah, that's the whole thing of it. You have to role play your character.
Words, right?
You don't just say my character goes over there. You have to role play him.
Right. Okay.
You have
You're
to
an actor.
role
You can do that.
Yeah.
And we'd rehearse, and they would catch me on misspellings, or they'd give me a bad time about some piece of dialogue, or they'd come up with something they thought was better. And I finally had to kind of show them who was boss, I think, at some point, tell them that I was the writer. They were the kids. They'd have to do what I said.
Maybe an elf or a leprechaun.
It was nothing like that, penis breath.
Elliot! Sit down.
It was very strange as a child with things like that, because I had been brought up where, you know, kids just didn't say those kind of things, you know. But it was really, I mean, in fact, I got away from saying holy shit. I just had to say penis. So I think Grandma could live with that one.
Well, Melissa did something that no one's ever done for me on a movie that I directed before or even since. And that is, she put every day's work on cards. She put the entire script of that day, not the whole week, just that day, on little IBM cards, 3x5 cards. And she put the dialogue in, and she put the stage directions in, and she transferred the script to small form. So these cards gave me amazing confidence. Rather than going through the unwieldy script and looking at my line script, which is full of notes and lines and everything, instead I had these little cards, and I was suddenly kind of liberated. I was unencumbered by the script and all that. I can walk around these cards in my pants pocket or my shirt pocket, pull them out and say, okay, this is what I'm shooting right now. And the cards somehow gave me the freedom to be able to go to the kids and say, you know, Drew and Henry, what would you say this was really happening to you? And I continued to try to get the kids to put their own lines in the movie. It's Gertie's line when she looks down and says, I don't like his feet. That's Drew's line.
I don't like his feet.
A lot of the kids, you know, found wonderful things to say that came from the truth of themselves that they were able to put into the movie.
Stephen wasn't afraid to let kids be kids and bring something new to the film. He had this table set up in Elliot's bedroom, and there was just all this junk on there, you know, just Star Wars toys and little gadgets and everything. And he said, okay, well, what I want you to do is, you know, you've brought him to your room, and show him what's on your table. You know, go down the line and just, you know, introduce everything you can.
These are toys. These are little men. This is Greedo, and then this is Hammerhead. See, this is Walrus Man, and then this is Snaggletooth, and this is Lando Calrissian. See, and this is Boba Fett.
It's great because we were allowed things like that. You know, we were allowed opportunities to kind of let it be told through children's eyes.
He'd go from thinking I was his new best friend to thinking I was his school teacher, because I would talk to Henry constantly. I talked to Henry so often while the camera was rolling, and while Henry was doing his dialogue, I would coach him while the camera was going, that when Henry first saw E.T. at the sneak preview, when I turned to him when the movie was over and said, how did you like it? He said, it was okay, but you've got to cut your voice out. Your voice is all the way through the movie. As Henry saw the movie, he kept hearing my voice directing him. 5 fingers, 5 fingers, 1 finger, 1 finger, 5 fingers, 5 fingers, faster and faster, guys. Surprise him. I dressed up as a teacher, but not as a man teacher. I dressed up with the veil and the wig and the lipstick, and I became a total kind of new me. You gotta take me serious. This is Halloween, folks. I don't dress this way all the time. I'm not trying to get out of the Army like Jimmy Farr. This is actually my date for tonight with a costume ball. Ah, Miranda, what sweet fingers you have.
What is she will be?
You say it yet?
What?
What is she will be? You say it yet or yet?
Oh, in the closet.
Yeah. Halloween. Remember Halloween?
Halloween was great.
We had such a good time, and Stephen dressed up as this old lady, and it was so brilliant.
He directed the whole day
Yes,
as an old lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
He would be, you know, behind the camera with his high heels, and he looked really great, too.
I'm enjoying this. I might never come out of this, as a matter of fact. There's a lot of advantages. Social advantages and other ways. For one thing, look at all those pretty colors you can wear. I didn't have children back in the early 80s, you know, and suddenly I was becoming a father. Every single day I felt like I was Drew's father, Henry's father, and Robert's father. And you know, it felt good. And I think I have a big family now because it felt pretty good having 3 kids back then. Isn't this fun, Drew? Learning how to play volleyball and tetherball and stuff like that?
That's fun.
Yeah. Do they pay you for going to school? Your mom is going to kill me for saying things like that.
I hope not.
I hope not, too. As a kid, I let all the frogs out of the science class, the ones we were supposed to dissect. I let about 5 of them go, and actually never got caught. So, you know, what the heck, I put it in the movie. But the toughest thing Henry had to do that he didn't want to do is on the first day of shooting, he had to kiss the girl on the lips. In the school scene where he stands on top of his classmate to be tall enough to kiss the girl right smack on the lips. And he didn't want to do this, and he didn't want to be a movie actor. At that moment, I saw his entire career. He was giving it all up.
Great.
Wait a minute. Wait. She swung off.
Cut. Guys.
What problem was it? Swung her too wide.
Okay, everybody back to your starting
Right side of the
places.
face.
Andrew,
In other words, you see, Henry, you kissed her this side. You want to kiss her this side. Your nose wants to be over here, not over there. Okay? John Wayne's nose was on that side of Marino O'Hara's face.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
You ready for more? Got a Tiger? All right. He's cooling off. He's cooling off. That's right.
That was the one part in the script that I remember sitting down reading it for the first time, going, okay, spaceship, cool. Alien, cool. Kissing a girl? No way, I have to do this.
Those problems and those issues were always there, and because we were dealing with real life, you know. We were dealing with an alien that all 3 young kids believe was real. Despite seeing the operators, the special effects technicians in the background, despite the kids catching out of their peripheral vision, a pull of the lever means a blink of the eye.
He's really real.
There was a lot of different elements, but for some reason, no matter what, it was always very real to me.
Yeah. It was amazing once everything was set to go and the cameras were rolling and you were in the scene, everything was incredibly real.
In the closet, fast.
I remember saying to Carlo that E.T. should kind of waddle when he walks like Chaplin with his cane, but he should also look like Bambi on ice, where Bambi couldn't find his footing. So when E.T. starts to walk on Earth, he is ungainly and he is insecure. I got a Yoda costume and didn't tell George Lucas I was doing this, and dressed someone up as Yoda. And I just had this idea, it'd be really fun, that as E.T. walks by with Elliot and Michael in their costumes, E.T. has a ghost with a sheet over him. Yoda's going in the other direction. Bikers.
I hadn't seen E.T. finished, and when we finally finished, it had a screen up here for ILM, and I went to the screening, and Steve had warned me that there was something special in it for me, and so we went through the thing, and then suddenly Yoda showed up in the film. Everybody in the audience cheered, of course, because it was an ILM screening, but I really loved it. I mean, I was amazed and flattered, and it was a very funny moment.
I just remember George was sitting right next to me, and when Yoda came on the screen, George gave me a little nudge with his arm. I guess it's his way of saying that was cool.
one of the nice shots that has become Amblin's sort of symbol is the view of the bicycle flying in front of the moon. And when that shot came up, it just seemed like, we should do this with a real moon. We should get as much realism into this as we can. And so Mike McAllister, trees, and I think it took about a week. In the afternoon he'd go out for 3 or 4 hours and find the right spot to be able to do it. And then I think we shot it for 2 nights and got 2 or 3 versions of it. That was about all we got in that time. And it's all real.
Don't crash, please.
I drew more upon the Close Encounter experience of having no villains whatsoever in that story, vis-a-vis Alien Visitation, and thought, why have villains in this story? The villain really should be adults who do not have the same pure understanding that children have about a situation like this, and the adults who would be afraid and more frightened than children, who might scream and call the police, and the police who may further not understand, or the government that may further not understand and want to experiment and do scientific laboratory, vivisectioning on an extraterrestrial. That would be the threat. The threat would be science.
I remember that in the earlier scripts, E.T. and Elliot were always, when they fell ill, taken to a hospital. And then it was up to Michael and his friends to come and rescue them from the hospital. And I remember scouting hospital after hospital. We couldn't find a hospital we really liked that would be available to us on a scale that we needed.
Stephen came in from an international flight. And at the time at Los Angeles International Airport, they were building the Bradley terminal, and they had a temporary structure erected for international flights, and it was one of these big pneumatic structures. Well, he had the idea, which was absolutely brilliant and psychologically so appropriate, to take the whole thing and bring it back to the home, which is this warm, comfortable environment that we've gotten used to where the kids are growing up turns into a nightmare.
And it made a lot of sense to me that the house would be the place that the government would seal up, shut down the neighborhood surrounding it, and do their work there.
Stay with me. Please stay together. I'll be right here. I'll be right here.
I had worked so much with very tangible to me, where I could just draw on the actual experience, what was going on in the scene, which is something that's very, very special, I think, when you can do that, because it makes it all the more real. You're not pulling something from a previous experience, you're drawing on the there and now.
Quiet!
It's still VFM.
Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go. Still VFM. Quiet!
Elliot. Mom.
I don't think tears have ever been that readily available to me in my entire life.
Make her apple. Okay, would you like them to have that?
Yeah. Wipe the doll's face too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Movies are so sad, especially this one.
The biggest actor of them all.
You know, I think it's going to be, it'll be sadder if it's happy sad. You know what I'm saying? And I think you'll feel sadder if it's more you're trying to cover that up. You're trying to cover the sadness with some happy talk to E.T. Like, remember when?
Yeah.
Remember 3 weeks ago? Remember when you first came into the house with me and I showed you Guido and Hammerhead and
Trying to hide it with a
Snaggletooth?
smile.
Trying to hide it with a smile a little bit, yeah.
He's an incredible sculptor of a story.
Mhm.
You know, it's very, that was a very important moment in the film, you know, and I think that in his hands, he knew what to get out of us.
I looked at the sequence and I had a bunch of storyboards for the sequence, so each of us got a rough idea of what these things had to do, how we had to build the scale on the bikes, how we had to scale up the puppets. They were fairly large for animation puppets. I think the tallest one was probably 2 feet tall, which is quite big. Ordinarily you work on a scale of about, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches. It's just easier to work that way. Easier as an animator to work that way. But these were built large so that we could get the detail into the bikes, so that we could get the detail into the outfits that the kids had to wear, which were made out of actual clothing, so that all this would, like, you know, scale up appropriately.
I really think that a big part of the reason the movie hasn't aged very much and it feels somewhat timeless is because, in a sense, it was never designed to be an effects movie. And so, even though we had to create that creature with the technology that existed then, Steven shot E.T. as a character in a way that he really existed. He wasn't trying to call attention to the fact that, isn't this a great effect? He was really trying to achieve something that would feel as real as possible. And as I said, even with ILM, the contribution was, I remember a lot of the reviews even said, was seamless. And it's because we didn't want a sky with a sliver moon to say, oh, isn't that a great effect shot? We wanted it to look like we'd actually shot that perfect night moon. And I think also, Steven made a very crucial decision in the design of the spaceship. And he said, I want this to look like Jules Verne. And again, that placed it in a kind of timeless context. He wasn't trying to come up with some sort of futuristic look at what outer space creatures may be flying around in. He took something that we already subconsciously identified with.
Well, Ralph McQuarrie contributed the entire design from scratch of the spaceship.
I explored various shapes that I thought would be interesting, that would be sort of in that category of the Dr. Seuss thing.
Ralph wanted to do a different spaceship, and he had this great concept on his own to do a bobble, just an oval, just a complete circle, with a very reflective mylar surface that would reflect the trees of the forest in Northern California and, you know, reflect the sky and the rainbow clouds. I mean, it was a wonderful concept, and he made this very kind of quixotic rendering where the E.T. spaceship looked a bit like E.T. It was squat, it had legs, and had little kind of like feet that went out from under it. And it was just, I just fell in love with the design, didn't question it, and just said, that's it, let's build it.
The hardest scene for me was probably the goodbye scene.
You'll walk all the way from here, right over to E.T., and you'll take your position in front of him. And the first thing he says is, he says, stay. He says, come. He puts his hands up and he says, come. And your mom and dad are waiting right over there off camera. And you just look over at your mom, and she is pleading with you not to go. She has tears in her eyes. She's sitting on her. She's actually fallen to her knees, and she's just with her eyes, not with anything she says, just with her eyes. She's saying to you almost mentally, "Don't go. Please stay with me. Stay home." And that you just turn back to E.T. and you don't have to say no, I can't. Don't have to verbalize it. You just shake your head and make E.T. know that you can't go with him.
You want to try sticking it down?
And at that point, E.T. lowers his head. He lowers his head real sadly, and he touches his heart, and he says, "Ouch." And then you'll touch your heart, and you'll say "ouch" back to him, because it hurts you as much as it's hurting him. This is a real heart-breaking moment for the two of you.
Easy, stay.
And then, after touching the heart, E.T. is going to put his hands on your shoulders, and he's going to bring you in for a hug. And you'll hug this side of E.T. You'll have his head on this side, and you'll just hug for a while. You'll just have you hugging for a while. And then you'll separate, and E.T. will point right to your forehead, right between your eyes. And he says, "Right here." He says, "I'll be right here." And you'll reach out your hand, you just sort of touch his cheek. And he has a little tear in his eye, just pretend there's a tear, then you'll wipe a tear away from E.T.'s face. And we'll play it that way. Okay? Real softly and gently and no rush. I think it was good to shoot the movie in continuity because you can't say to a youngster, "We're shooting the last scene first and the first scene last." You can't say that to a kid. It doesn't make sense to them. And I wanted them to be so caught up as themselves and as their characters by the time they say goodbye to E.T. that whatever emotion happened there would happen on take one and would be genuine emotion. And every single shot you see of Elliot crying and hugging E.T. and saying, "I'll be right here," and doing this, that's all take one.
There was a scene shot where Elliot and the boys are playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons again. First of all, Elliot's now the ringmaster rather than the little brother trying to get in. He has all this confidence. He's grown. He's the master of his own destiny now.
We come in peace. We have been on this journey for many days. We are adventurers, searching for experience. If we don't got any, we aren't going to be able to survive in this world. Goodbye, E.T.
The camera goes out the window and rises, and you see that on the roof is the communicator.
Okay, we have two shields now.
All right, let's
Sure.
split up.
No,
Try
I
to
get one
start
shield,
a
I
new
get
game.
one shield. Isn't it getting too late? No, come on. Sure. Okay, my monk paladin's going on.
Yeah, paladin monk. Right, wrong, forget
Sure.
it.
What's wrong with the paladin monk?
Go
It's in the
home,
rules.
Mike. Mikey, we don't like it.
This is my home.
I'm sorry. Get out then.
What does he have now? Plate mail, huh?
No,
You can only assume that one day they'll be in touch again. It's a nice ending. It would be just as good as the other ending. But what happened, I believe, is that when the other ending was shot and looked at, it was so emotional. Henry was so emotional that it was hard to go anywhere else. And it didn't really matter whether you felt like they were going to see each other again. That wasn't the point anymore.
Very early on, we, in trying to get the film down to size, we made several fairly large lifts. And because you never know if those pieces of film are going to go back in, they were lifted out in their entirety. I remember one of the first big lifts that we took was the school material, where Elliot's acting up at school. He's taken to the principal's office. The principal was played by Harrison Ford.
I don't know,
You say you don't know why you did these things.
but I'm sorry. I'll never do them again.
I see you fine young people from good homes, every advantage, your whole life laid out in front of you. And I see the pot, the pills, the angel wings. Sure, it's a cruel world out there. Deceit, treachery,
It was a very big deal for me because I had done a couple of things before, but I'd always, the reason I got involved in film in the first place was because I had seen Star Wars, and that was fantastic to me. And this came along, and there was an alien, and I was, wow, this is great. And Harrison Ford, my God, who could ask for anything more?
I'm there.
I'm there.
So we have Harrison Ford playing the principal, very strict, sitting back, in a tweed suit. And I didn't show his face that clearly. I just showed the back of his head and his hand tapping and his leg, because I wasn't showing adults in the movie. So he was still that's why I think he did it. He said he'd do it because he didn't have to really be on camera. And so as he's lecturing Elliot, but his back is turned, so he's not looking at Elliot. Elliot's sitting in a chair across from the principal. E.T., meanwhile, is at home trying to take all these communicator parts and telepathically, somewhat, through telekinesis, move them up the stairs. So as E.T. is successful in moving all this junk heap up the stairs to the bedroom, Elliot starts rising.
I wouldn't lie to you, son. See, you're in a way your own best friend, or your own worst enemy. I think the best thing to do is to go home for the rest of the day and think about what's happened here today and tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, like they say, tomorrow's the first day of the rest of your life. Am I right?
May we go now?
Yes, both of you dismissed. Dismissed.
I have this little part in the movie where I'm a nurse, and it's a scene that, thank goodness, and lucky for all of us, is no longer in the movie. But Elliot is acting so berserko in class that they send him down to the school nurse. So they put me in this nurse's outfit with a little hat, and I remember that there was a big discussion whether my hair should be really flat or be sticking out. So they chose sticking out, and luckily I was a silhouette. Which, even still, it's good I'm gone, but I was only a silhouette. I didn't have to talk. But I did have to grab Elliot by the arm, and I think at one point Henry complained that I was grabbing him too hard. But luckily it's no longer in there.
Action! I think all movies, every scene needs to advance the story. And anytime a scene doesn't advance the story, but is just fun for the sake of fun, it doesn't really belong in the movie, but belongs in kind of a neat, nifty archive, or maybe at the back of a laser disc. I regret two things in the movie. I regret that a gun was used as a threat to stop children on bicycles. And that last cut, before E.T. opens his eyes and the bikes take off, of the gun coming up, not pointing at the kids, but just coming up in a brandishing, kind of at-ready position. I regret that cut, and I regret the cut of the cops with guns in their hand, running out to the abandoned, Econoline van with the dry ice pouring out of the back, and E.T. is gone and he's not in there. I really regret having any guns in the movie. And if I ever reissue the picture, delete the shot of the cop holding the gun up, which in the current film causes E.T. to fly. I think those were two, distasteful moments for me.
E.T. phone home.
When I did the picture, I had to give off-camera dialogue, and rather than just have the script person read the dialogue out loud in a normal tone of voice, I began to say things like,
E.T. phone home.
Or I would say things like,
Elliot. Elliot. Or I'll be right here.
And it was that sort of thing, and it was fun to do, and I did that, and that became the temp track, the beautiful voice. And one day, when I was shooting the Halloween scene, just before dusk, we began turning the cameras. Deborah came over to visit, and I said, "Can you come over and like do every single ET line in the script for me to a tape recorder?" And I brought the sort of tape recorder or Nagra. It was a full Nagra into my trailer in the suburbs, and I turned it on. And Deborah took the script and did every single voice. So anybody and everybody who saw the rough cut of ET heard a couple lines of mine, actually still in the movie, but most of all, they heard Deborah Winger's voice and never knew it was Deborah doing all the voice inside the rough cut. And then Ben Burt found Pat Welsh.
She was not an actress, and although she had always wanted to be an actress, and in fact had briefly pursued ambitions in those directions sometime back in the 1930s or 40s. I explained to her what I was trying to do, that I was searching for an interesting quality voice for an alien character, and would she be interested in auditioning. And she was a very good sport, and I took her right down the street there. We were only a block away from our studio, and took her inside and had her do some readings of some of the lines that E.T. would say, like, phone home.
E.T., phone home. Oh my God, he's talking.
Oh. E.T. phone home.
E.T., phone home.
And so I took her voice and I changed it just a little bit electronically. I changed the pitch and lowered it just a little bit. And I had her speak in a rather monotone quality and slowly. And what I would do to give it an element of the alien character was I would mix her voice with the breathing or the inhale and exhale of one of the animal sounds that I had recorded, something that was sort of non-human. And to the human ear, you can detect the human quality as well as the, say, animal quality, the non-human quality. And it was that blend that I began to work with to create, to envelope the words that she would speak in English. I should mention that all told, there were 18 different contributors to the voice of E.T., including the animals, as well as the various human characters. Certainly Pat Welsh's was the most significant single contribution because she did the English words. But remember, those words were enveloped and intercut with all kinds of other little noises. There's scenes when E.T. gets drunk, and I used some vocalizations from my old cinema professor at USC, Ken Mura. I guess he plays a good drunk alien. I don't know. There were some other children and friends of mine that I recorded breathing and making funny noises. I really just collected a lot of different pieces of things to put it all together.
Well, let's go on and go back, shall we?
And music's out. Music's out.
Okay.
We are OUT at that point.
Okay. Well, let's go back and cue this little thing.
Right. And I've always felt that Johnny was my musical rewrite artist. He'd come in, see my movie, and rewrite the whole damn thing musically and make it much better than I did. And he can take a moment and just uplift it, and he can take a tear that's just forming in your eye, and he can cause it to drip.
The first time, so the composer doesn't have the benefit of all the beautiful visuals and the dissolves and all the rest of it that's put in later. what do we have to do musically to accompany a thing like that? I look for melody, all these intervals that reach up all the time, you know, to stretch the musical grammar, to give this kind of feeling. And then in performance, the same thing. I don't know what that's more like ballet, that's more like a certain kind of energy of how you've got a 100-piece symphony orchestra, how do you make it feel like it's going to come right off the floor and not be all these heavy people playing violins, but with lift. And so that's a kind of immediate balletic or even athletic goal of the music in a scene like that. And when you get that feeling, you fill your heart with it because it's like a deep breath of wonderful air and you feel free. And it's affirmed that you have a creature that you can fly with that is not of our own species, but of our own spiritual oneness that we come together and join, and we go over the moon. Fantastic idea, and it needs great sweep in the music and great feeling of freedom. Freedom being, in this case, the loss of gravity. We speed up beyond escape velocity, we lose gravity, and we're now in space, and we are finally free. And that's what the orchestra has to give us, the composer has to give us.
In 1975, he directed Jaws. In 1978, he directed Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1981, he directed Raiders of the Lost Ark. And now, Steven Spielberg brings us E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
The sneak preview of E.T. was a religious experience. It was emotional, it was loving, it was generous on the audience's part, and it was a love fest. It really was. And you know, you never know what you got until you show it to an audience for the first time. And I didn't pretend that E.T. was anything other than a kids movie about kids, for kids, of kids, by kids, even by. I was
funny going, they're laughing, they like it. And it was overwhelming. I see all these kids it was the kids primarily, to see the reaction they were having. And then at the end of the movie, everybody at a preview audience, they're all standing up and clapping and stuff. You just don't ever see that.
Everybody paid complete attention, and there was a real feeling of identification. You could just slice the atmosphere. And it was just a wonderful, tender film festival. It was almost a phenomenon, you know. We took the film out of competition to Cannes on the last night.
And about 15 minutes before the end of the movie, people started to clap and stomp their feet. And we thought, what is this? You know, because first of all, your stomach's churning and you're nervous and you think, oh my God, they don't like the movie. And then we realized it was just the opposite. They loved the movie.
I'd never been to the Cannes Film Festival before. You know, what a way to go for the first time. I got this little telegram from Francois Truffaut, and the telegram, which meant so much to me, said, "You belong here more than me," echoing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, that just broke me up. And then at the end of the festival, we had like a 15-minute standing ovation, and I remember I kept getting standing up and sitting down, and they kept clapping and standing up, sitting down, and I was getting embarrassed, and I turned to Melissa and made her get up and sit down. She got tired, and everybody around me, I kept, take a bow. We were all getting, it was an amazing experience, and then there was this little flame in the middle of the crowd, and somebody was holding up a little lighter. I looked down at one person who wasn't clapping, just holding up a little, you know, cigarette lighter, and the flame was standing out, and it was Jerry Lewis, just holding up this lighter, which was a wonderful thing to see Jerry smiling, and it was you know, that will never be equaled.
I think we had a couple of genuine conversations about sequels. As I recalled, we were going to create another character called Joe, who was going to be a long, spindly guy. He was sort of going to be like the Fred Astaire to E.T.'s Gene Kelly. And we had fun sort of playing around with the idea. But at one point, I actually remember us sort of shaking hands on the fact that there would never be a sequel.
On many levels, this is a story that was very, very personal to Steven. And I think he always felt, and I think he was right to feel this way, that it would cheapen the movie and the experience of the movie and what it meant to him and what it meant to audiences to just go try and duplicate the movie in some way. And on so many different levels, it was an experience for him and for all of us that we weren't going to duplicate.
I never made a sequel to E.T. because I can't ever make an E.T. movie as good as what I did. I mean, I would only shame the memory. I would only show people the flaws. E.T. isn't a mechanical cottage industry that invites further adventures of E.T. and other kids on the planet Earth. It is a one-time event. And to do 2 or 3 or 4 movies based on that one character is creating a franchise that I didn't, frankly, think was the honest and right thing to do. I could only further denigrate the memory of the first one by doing a second one. So I've just held out all these years, and I don't ever plan to make a sequel to E.T.
He is the cutest alien I have ever met and seen.
What do you think about all these people? You think they're going to like the movie?
I hope so.
Look at them all out there. There's a lot of people here.
Yeah. Last time, remember how far? I think it was around the block. I think it was, wasn't it? It was.
We were really meal without somebody coming up to you, and trying to embrace life on that level, I think was hard, being as young as we were. But I know that, we did it really well, which is really cool.
I don't know how much it changed me because I've never lived without having done it for me, and it opened a lot of doors for me and did a lot of good.
I think that it afforded...
It opened me up to more personal stories. Color Purple followed soon after that. Then came Empire of the Sun, and finally Schindler's List. It was, in a way, a ladder on a course of a kind of personal movie about human characters and human exploits and the human condition, as opposed to the other movies, which are much more, adventures and films like Jaws and the Raiders films and Jurassic Park. So my career sort of gone, on 2 different roads that parallel one another. There's this kind of film, there's that kind of film. And I think E.T. gave me the courage to start creating that kind of film. Lovely cut. Beautiful. Beautiful. Like that.